Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 9:30 p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention. It's up to us. Wednesday night, November the 24th. I'm happy to be here. It's a 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast, and I've got the chat room open there. Just barely made it into my show. And I wanted to talk tonight about child discipline from the Child Discipline series. And this is from Child Parenting, http://childparenting.about.com, and I'll just pop that link into the chat room. And I found this article really interesting. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I appreciate this very much. I just got back from Paso Robles, California last night with the Dreamcatcher team, Sandra Potter, CEO and founder of Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, as well as Donna Shear, president of Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, Elizabeth Brawley, the Southern Regional Director, and myself went out to Paso Robles, California, to the Paso Robles Digital Film Festival put on, and we were invited by the director and producer of the festival, Binford Stanley. Personal invitation 2 years in a row, so we got to go to this one. And Sandra Potter invited and Donna Shear invited myself and Elizabeth to attend with them, and it was just awesome. And so I'm glad to be back, glad to be able to do these shows. But we had a great time, and it was just awesome to be able to get the word out, to potentially millions of people about stopping child abuse, right? So it's so important. And I wanted to look at this article because really, a lot of parents think that discipline, but that they're disciplining their children when they're actually abusing their children, by beating them with boards until they, break bones, and then the children have to go to the hospital, and then the parents say, well, I was just disciplining my child, and, they don't think of it as being abuse, right? But any action or inaction that harms a child, whether it's intentional or sometimes not, is child abuse, right? It's against the law. And so there's better ways of coping. And I just wanted to take a look at this because I found this article. I actually saw this before, but I wanted to talk about it tonight because there's better ways of coping. We don't have to, as parents, you don't have to kill your children. You don't have to beat them up. You don't have to injure them physically. You don't have to verbally berate them. You don't have to psychologically damage them. You don't have to emotionally damage your children. That's abuse. And the issue is that so many people think it's discipline, right? So I want to talk about child discipline here, and from this awesome website here, about.com. This was written. It's from Kimberly L. Keith, former about.com guide, Child Discipline series, and I just happen to like what she's written here, and it's just so interesting because it's got to be difficult, parents coming up with these situations that, with their children and having to discipline their children, because children do need direction. They do need discipline. I don't like the word discipline because, it reminds me too much of abuse, right? Because I grew up abused. So I like the word direction better. But parents do have to direct their children. There is discipline that is necessary. But discipline is not abuse. It's to teach your children and to help them to learn, to develop properly, to grow up, with morals and values, and to know what's right and wrong, right? We do need to teach our children what's right and what's wrong. And I don't have any children. My baby died halfway through my pregnancy, so I don't have any children, but I know that if I did, I would be taking parenting classes because I grew up abused, and I would want to make sure that I would not be passing the cycle of abuse on to my child, as much as I know that I would not do the same things that my parents did to me, as far as what they consider to be discipline, which is to bash my head in and to beat me severely and things like this. But I think that and to berate me and verbally, emotionally, psychologically assault me on a daily basis. The thing is I know that I would want to do the best by my children, so I would have parenting classes. And so I'm quite interested in looking at this stuff because I think it's so important that all parents really should take a look at on how they're parenting, and just to make sure that they're not abusing their children, right? So many times people think it's discipline and it's actually abuse, and you're hurting your children, and many parents don't care. They're just like, I don't care, I'm the parent, and these are the rules in this house, and so, I'll just treat my children this way, without realizing that it's against the law, to abuse your children, because they're thinking they're just disciplining their children, when actually they're abusing them. There was a case, actually, I was looking at the child abuse headlines, and there was a case where this one woman just recently in the United States, she injured her child by because she was disciplining her child because the child ate some fruit that she wasn't supposed to, the 7-year-old girl, and she grabbed a wrench, some sort of a wrench out of the cupboard, out of the cabinet, and pinched her daughter's ear with this wrench, causing the ear to become deformed and mutilated. And then they had, she went to the doctor and they were going to have to do plastic surgery on her ear because the cartilage was exposed. And that woman thought she was disciplining her child. She just thought that was discipline. See, so many parents out there, they just do the wrong things and they hurt their children and they think it's discipline. Like one man I think it was early summer, he killed his child. He abused him for 3 days, tied him up, and tortured him, beating him, relentlessly kicking him, and really physically, killing the child. And then on the third or fourth day, whichever it was, he hit the child so hard he broke his neck. And so, why he did that? Because the child took a muffin off the stove, and he said that the child was stealing food, and he had to teach him a lesson. So, see, in his mind, he was just disciplining the child. He didn't consider it to be abuse or murder. See, he didn't think there was anything wrong with that. And, my parents, my mom bashed my head in with a rolling pin, an extremely heavy hardwood rolling pin that was handmade, twice the size of a normal rolling pin, right? And about 2 or 3 times the weight of it, right? And thought that it was okay, right? That's all right to do that to your child as your child's, I had blood streaming down my head and I was dizzy and disoriented and could have gone into a coma. Thank God, I didn't, and thank God I'm still here. But the whole issue is that people sometimes think that that's discipline when it's not. That's abuse. And so I want to look at this article, Child Discipline Series from Kimberly L. Keith. And it says, child discipline is an important and emotional issue for parents of elementary-age children. We worry about misbehavior and how we should handle it. Ongoing behavior problems lead us to feel frustrated and angry, she says. We dislike having to punish our children. The majority of us need to learn more effective ways to discipline our children. Effective discipline helps our children to develop self-control, respect for authority, and empathy, right? Both spoiled and harshly disciplined children are at risk for emotional and behavioral problems. And one new approach or discipline strategy can change the course of our child's development. So it says children are different and so are parents. As you explore the discipline principles here, you should choose the strategies that fit your family. So take the risk to try something new. As your child grows, remember these basic principles underlie the variety of discipline strategies you will use. So it says good child discipline begins with attachment. And it says attachment begins when the child is an infant. To continue good attachment parenting through the elementary years, see these tips on attachment parenting of older children. So she's got a little link there. You can click on that and follow that link. It says, if your child has difficulties with attachment from infancy, effective professional help during the elementary years steers your family and child to a positive and hopeful adolescence. So it says good child discipline shows respect for the child and the parent, right? Discipline techniques that belittle or shame a child are truly harmful. And if your relationship with your child has become a power struggle, then control, not discipline, has become your goal. Diffuse this toxic relationship with good listening skills. Show respect for your child's feelings and thoughts while standing firm on your expectations for good behavior. Respect for parents and other authorities is crucial to self-discipline and healthy development. Help your child learn respect for authority by making your own words and actions as a parent worthy of respect, right? That's the whole issue. So many times parents want their children to respect them, but there's nothing to respect about the parent. And, that's true. So many times parents are like, oh, you're going to respect me as they're beating their child or kicking their child around the room. And how can you respect that? You can't respect a parent who's doing that. You can't force respect, basically. I mean, I believe that you have to teach respect and you have to earn it because you have to show it. So if you show your children respect from day one, from the time they're a baby all the way up through their teen years, and you learn on how to develop this relationship with your child or your children, even in their rebellious years or when they're just not listening to you, you can generally work through this stuff with a little bit of help because if you bring up your children properly in the first place with a lot of respect for yourself and for your family, respect for them, it's just bound to have positive reactions. It's like a positive thing stays in motion, right? And even though you might still have a little trouble with them later on when they're teens trying to push the boundaries and push the limits, You're not going to, if they respect you because you've always respected them, and they know that in the past you've never hurt them on purpose, you've never made them to feel bad about themselves, you've never made them to feel shameful about themselves or made them to feel bad about them, and actually really brought them up with a lot of respect and love and care, most children will come around, even if they do give you a little bit of a hard time for a while. They generally will come around because they see that you truly love them and that you truly care about them, and that the reason why you're having to put your foot down on certain issues is just truly because you are concerned about their safety, and as a parent, it's your obligation to do that. And so, they generally, after a while, figure it out. So there's ways to handle this stuff without beating and battering your children and or cursing them, throwing them around the room, or verbally abusing them, or kicking them out of the house, which is quite, convenient, isn't it? It's actually against the law. And so, all that stuff is against the law. Child abuse is against the law. Thank God we have laws set up now that say it's wrong to hurt and harm a child, and it's against the law. So there you go. Good child discipline changes as the child grows, it says. When discipline doesn't seem to be working for your family, you want to step back and look again at the problem. The first step is to learn what is normal behavior for your child's age and stage of development. And some misbehavior is an expression of transitions in the school-age child's rapid development. So parental expectations may be beyond what the child is able to achieve on a consistent basis. So I think this is very important for people to know that, they have to know that, at what age their child is and what stage of development their child is, what normal behavior is for their child. And the only way you can really know that is to get the information, unless you were brought up properly by your own parents and they taught you that, and it's just kind of instinctual. It's just part of the way that you were raised, so you understand it at those levels, right? But if you were brought up in a situation where there was a lot of abuse and a lot of just poor parenting styles and poor parenting, then you want to make sure that you get the information to know what is appropriate for children at these different stages of development, right? Because so many times parents just don't know, and they put these expectations on their children, and there's no way that their children can fulfill those expectations, and that leads to a lot of abuse, right? Good child discipline requires good family communication, and this is huge, I think. Giving instructions and consequences, planning for good behavior, listening to your child, holding family meetings, and resolving conflict are just a few of the opportunities parents have to encourage self-discipline and maintain good family relationships. When confronting a problem, your style of communication will help or hinder a successful resolution. Learn how to communicate effectively with your child with these quick how-tos. So there's all these links here. You can learn how to listen to your child, how to praise your child, how to give instructions to your child, and how to give consequences to your child, how to hold a family meeting, and how to resolve family conflict, and how to build your child's self-esteem. And, growing up in the home that I grew up in, we didn't have any family meetings, and there was a lot of abuse, domestic violence and abuse, and a lot of child abuse going on. And my parents were actually brought up on charges and went to court, and they were told that they would lose the children, all of us in the home. There was 5 of us in the home at the time. 2 of my older siblings moved out. One was married and the other one was 16, and he left home. And that left all the rest under the age of 14 years old, down to myself in the home. And the courts were going to take us away if my parents didn't get help and didn't get counseling and all this, because there was a lot of abuse going on. My parents we didn't hold any family meetings. There was no way to resolve family conflict. There was a lot of abuse. They completely destroyed all of our self-esteem. The consequences were just abuse, right? I mean, there was no consequences. Kind of like, there was no timeouts. It was just, we were just punching bags for our parents, right? And they didn't give instructions. They just abused us, right? So if they didn't like something that we were doing, then we would be told off and abused, right? So that's the whole issue. There was no listening to us or praising us. They never praised us as children. They never praised each other. My parents were very abusive towards each other as well as all of us. So I grew up in a very dysfunctional home where none of this was done. And so that's why when I look at it, I'm like, wow, I wish I would have grown up in a home where my parents would have listened to me, and I would have listened to them, where they would have taught me that we have to have family meetings and that we would all sit down and listen to each other and talk it out. and work through the stuff, and that there would be consequences, but it wouldn't lead to abuse, and it would be that things, there's always consequences to everything, and that we need to learn, to cope and to problem solve and to help ourselves to have the best life that we can, and sit down and hold family meetings and be, help build our children's self-esteem. And like, I wish my parents would have done that with us, right, to help build our self-esteem, and that they wouldn't have abused us and hurt us. And so many times parents think that they're just disciplining their children when they're beating them and lashing out at them, verbally abusing them, and they think, oh, that'll make my child straighten up if I beat them with a belt, or if I put their hands in the oven doors, or if I stick their hands in the oven, things like this, right? Or if I bash their heads in with a rolling pin, or kick them around the room, slap them on a regular basis, and break their nose, things like this, right? My parents were very much into corporal physical punishment, and so they kind of thought that we would all straighten up if they would abuse us, right? And it really didn't cause us to straighten up. What it did was cause us to hate them, to hate ourselves, and then to go out and try to kill ourselves, and which two of my brothers did, and then also to engage in all kinds of risky behaviors, as well as drug use and drug abuse and all kinds of problems. So what they did was they destroyed our family. And each other, right? But my case is kind of one of these. It's kind of severe. But I know that, like so many families don't hold family meetings. There's no such thing anymore. I mean, I think I know personally a few people that are doing this with their families and always have, and they said that it worked out really, really well because the children were not in fear. The children never had to be in fear that their parents would beat on them or hurt them or throw them out of the house, and that they would always sit down and talk and, talk things through, and the children respected their parents for that, even though there were still issues, there always will be. But it's a matter of, hey, parents, that if your children know that you love them and that you care about them and you would do anything to protect them, and that really you've got their best interests at heart, and you're not just one of these parents who's just like, do as I say but not as I do, which so many parents are like that, right? That your parents would truly listen to you, and eventually they would figure out that you do have their best interests at heart, and they might disobey you still, but just knowing that that you love them and that you care about them unconditionally, they generally come around and apologize and realize what they've done is wrong. And it helps them to learn how to problem solve so that they can realize, hey, if I do this, it's going to disappoint my parents. And if I do this, it's because my parents love me so much. And I can't imagine that, see, because I didn't grow up like that. So I'm just going through thinking of how nice it would have been to have parents who would have been like that, to say that, wow, my parents just love me so much that they don't want to see me get hurt, and that's why they're saying this. That's why they're not allowing me to do this certain thing, or they're trying to get me to do this or that. It's because they truly love me and have my best interests at heart, right? And so I can imagine that must be just an awesome feeling for kids. And so I would just promote that, you know what I mean? Because I think that children, they all deserve to have a loving, nurturing, caring home where there's no fear from, that they're going to be abused by their parents because they've done something, or they're not listening to their parents, so they're going to be abused. And, there's got to be better ways to dealing with it, right? And for parents out there, I know it must be hard dealing with, the issues today and raising children. And I would just say that there's better ways than killing your children. There's a whole lot of better ways out there, to effectively discipline and teach your children without hurting them, right? Whether it's physically or just, emotionally, verbally, psychologically hurting your children, right? So I would say, parents, get the help you need. Don't hurt your children. Don't beat on them. Don't kill them, burn them, stab them, break their necks for taking muffins off the stove, right? There's better ways to cope, right? Abusers are the ones with the problem, not the child, right? And parents are the ones with the problem, not the child. When you think of it, children are, they learn at different ages, they learn at different rates, they learn at different stages, and quite often the whole reason why the parent's having a hard time with the child is because the parent has a problem, and they cannot figure out how to get help with it, because there's no reason why people can't work with their children properly to help get them to the place they need to be, so that they are behaving properly, and there's good, like they said here, self-discipline and just good problem-solving skills going on there, then that they know the consequences of their behavior, right? And that that they would then in turn pass that on to their children, right? So I think, we can break the cycle of abuse. We really can. But it's going to take everyone to do it. And it's going to take parents, first of all, to do that, right? To stop abusing their children and start learning how to be proper parents, right? How to really properly parent so that you can raise your child in a loving, caring environment, right? It really has almost nothing to do with money. It has everything to do with what's going on inside your heart and how much you actually care about that child, that you would change your behavior so that you don't hurt your child, right? Because it's not the child's fault, and it could never be the child's fault. Abuse is the abuser's choice. They do what they do. Parents choose to abuse their children. That's a choice. No one's telling a parent to burn their child or abuse their child in any way, beat their child or rape their child. Abusers are choosing to do what they do because that's what they want to do to that child, right? And that's what they feel is appropriate, which, is completely wrong, and thank God against the law, which makes me happy. But the thing is sadly enough, they ruin these children's lives, and what they do is they ruin the family unit. And it's you can't get that back. You know what I mean? I don't care, how much family counseling you might have. If you've bashed your child's head in, they're always going to remember that. And even though you might even tell them, oh, well, I really do love you, I'm sorry I bashed your head in, which my mom did never apologize for that, and really, made no apologies to me, period, for any of the abuse that she put on me my whole life. But I know that there probably is parents out there who do hurt their children and then apologize for it, but I can't imagine that actually means anything to that child, because even though they might still love their parents, the abuse happened and they know it happened, right? So there's better ways than hurting your children, and you can maintain that respect and that awesome relationship with your family, if you get help as a parent, so that you don't hurt and harm your child, right? It's just so important. Like we have to change and break the cycle of abuse, right? It's so important. Because that's the whole issue, is that parents are teaching their children how to be bad parents, right? And then the children go on and they teach their children how to be bad parents if they don't get some help. So it's just very important that people realize that it is a cycle and that it's 100% preventable. So it's just, it's just very, very important that parents get the information, right? And that's why I was saying earlier, because of the way that I grew up, and that I would have parenting classes if I was going to, if I was going to bring a child into the world or raise a child, that I would make sure that I had every bit of information I could possibly get, and all the help that I could get, to help support me so that I would not hurt my child, and that I would be doing the right things and the proper things, and not pass the cycle of abuse on. It's just really important. And so many people just live these ignorant lives. They don't ever look for the information because that's how they grew up, so they figure, oh, it was good enough for me, it's good enough for my child, this is how I was treated as a child. So, quite often that's what parents will say, well, this is how I was brought up, so this is how I'm going to bring up my children, and it's just fine. When in actuality, if it goes into the court of law, it's abuse, and they could be arrested and convicted and sent away to do some prison time for something that they think is completely okay, like sodomizing children. Many people abuse their children sexually and think that it's perfectly all right. And that's so sad and so sick and wrong. But you know what? It's so true. And we see this all the time out there in the headlines. And then, they're probably sitting there going, well, what did I do? And it's like, you have no idea. Like, you must be like, I don't know, brain dead or something, like to think that it's okay to sexually use a child. There must be something completely missing and lacking in your brain or somewhere in yourself that would make you think that it's okay to do that to a child, right? But there are people out there that think that that's perfectly okay. And then there's people out there that think it's perfectly okay to put their children in the hospital due to abuse, beating on them and torturing them, kicking them around, breaking their bones, throwing them over the stairs, things like this. Shaken baby syndrome is a huge issue. Lots and lots of parents shake their babies, and then their babies end up with all kinds of problems, which could lead to, paralysis, and they end up in wheelchairs with life support, with breathing tubes, feeding tubes, and everything else. Check out the Shaken Baby Syndrome websites, and you can see that. And that's just from people, who the baby's crying or whatever, for whatever reason, they can't cope with that baby, and they shake it, and the brain bounces around inside the skull because the brain hasn't caught up with the size of the skull yet, and it just bounces off the walls of the inside of the skull, and it causes all kinds of problems. So parents, do not shake your babies, right? I hope they bust every single person out there who has ever shaken a baby. I hope there's judgment for them. I really do. And I hope that there's judgment for it, and that these people out here who are doing this right now will be completely busted and put away in prison for the rest of their life. I would really like to see that. And so because it's so incredibly wrong, it will never be right. So I have something against child abuse. Right, as you can tell, I know that I have over 15,000 shows listened to. Somebody's listening to my shows. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate everybody who's listening to me night after night after night, griping and complaining about child abuse. As you all know, I have something severely against child abuse. I mean, I am so set against child abuse because I know what these kids are going through out here. I know what it's like to have my head slammed into walls. I know what it's like to be thrown across rooms. I know what it's like to be beaten with belts. And I know what it's like to be beaten, senseless. And I know what it's like to lose blood at the hands of a parent. And, when your own parent spills your own blood, it's serious. And they think it's a discipline. Oh, it's just discipline. She deserved it. She was a bad kid. This is what my family thinks, right? They think it was okay that my parents did this to me. They were abused too, see, but they just agreed with it. They went along with it, whereas I'm speaking out against it, right, because I know that it was wrong. It's incredibly wrong to do that to your children. And so if you're a parent out there and you're having a hard time, and you think, well, I don't want to hurt my child, but what can I do? Well, there's ways to cope. And, there's all it's not something to be thinking, there's no help out there. How am I going to get help? There is help out there for parents who are having a hard time coping. There's all kinds of websites out there with information on it for parents. There's group support for parents who are having a hard time with their children. They don't know who to turn to. There's all kinds of people out there who are willing to help, who've been there and experienced it, and they know how hard it is, right, to parent this, especially in today's world with the way it's so fast-paced and everything has to be done now, and there's no time for anything, and everybody's working 2 jobs, and so, it's very, very stressful. But parents, you don't have to hurt your children, right? There's better ways to cope. So if you think you're going to lash out at your child, first of all, stop what you're doing and take a time out. I don't care if you're going to lash out at them verbally, emotionally, psychologically, physically, whatever. Don't lash out at your child. Take a 10-minute breather. Take a breather. Take a breather as long as you need to take a breather. Walk away from it for a bit, and then breathe and calm down and think about your child's age and think about the fact that you're the adult in the situation and that you can handle it without hurting your child. You don't have to hurt them. You don't have to slap them around and punch them and kill them, You can work it out with your child. You can get the information. If you can't, then you phone somebody for help, so that you don't hurt your child, right? It's so important that people do this, right? We have young mothers, killing their babies because they interrupt their time on Farmville, right? We have, fathers raping and sodomizing their 2-month-old babies, right? And this is a situation that abuse is a choice, and you don't have to do that to your child. So if you're a parent, you're listening to this, and you think the next time your child misbehaves or your teenager does something that you don't like and is disrespecting you, stop screaming in their face. Stop slapping them around. Stop throwing things at them or throwing them out of the house. And stop hurting them. And sit down and say, you know what, son or daughter, I love you. I always will. Let's work through this. And if they're all giving you sass, you just tell them, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be here today, tomorrow, the next day. I'm not going anywhere. And we are going to work through this. You know what I mean? And you just keep on telling them, and you just keep on telling them, because eventually it will sink into their heads that what you're saying is true. But if you've been nothing but abusive to them the whole time, then you might have to get some help with it. You might have to have someone come in, a third-party person come in and get involved with, a counselor, therapist, somebody come in, who does work with family conflict in situations like that, right? Because if you've already screwed with that child's head, for 15 years. It's going to be real hard for them to believe a word that you're saying, right? So be very, very careful what you do to your children, and be very, very careful what you say to your children, because, ultimately it is your fault and your responsibility, right? So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate it very much. Have a great night. I'll be back on tomorrow morning, One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. I'll be back on 6 o'clock a.m. Mountain Standard Time, same time as usual. I'm back on my regular schedule tomorrow morning. And thanks for being here, everybody. I really appreciate it. Have a great night. Take care of yourselves. If you need any information that I can get for you, please let me know. Visit Dreamcatchers for Abused Children website, www.dreamcatchersforAbusedChildren.com. And we have lots and lots of great information on there for parents who can't cope, and for people who, if you're in an abusive relationship, all kinds of references, resources, and numbers. And, you just go there and check it out. And if we can get you any information, please let us know, right? Have a great night, everybody, and we'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.